Hello, and welcome to today's Hatch Center Symposium, Crypto at a Crossroads. By way of introduction, I'm Matt Sangren, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Orrin G. Hatch Foundation. And I'm honored to be joined today by three experts in the crypto finance field. United States Senator Cynthia Lummis, representing the great state of Wyoming, former Fed Reserve Vice Chair Randall Quarles, and Bitstamp CEO Bobby Zagoda. Together, the three of them will give us a closer look at the crypto economy and how the policies coming out of Washington could make or break our country's ability to lead in this industry. Since Satoshi Nakamoto first published the Bitcoin white paper in 2008, crypto has gone from an internet hobby to a booming financial industry, attracting the attention of investors from Main Street to Wall Street. This technology has made its way into the mainstream, introducing us all to concepts like NFTs, hardware wallets, and decentralized finance. Many believe that crypto has the potential to redefine everything we know about how business, politics, media, finance, and even relationships work. But regulatory clarity is key to extracting maximum value from the emerging crypto economy. And that's why it's important that we get the regulation and policies right. Thankfully, we've got Senator Lummis, Randy, and Bobby here today to help us understand how we can strike the right balance on regulation. Before I turn the time over to our guests and we begin the Q&A session, I'd like to just take a few moments to introduce each of them. Senator Lummis is the go-to senator on all things crypto. She's owned Bitcoin since 2013 and has played an invaluable role in establishing Wyoming as a hub for crypto innovation. This year, she plans to release a new legislative framework for blockchain regulation intended to maximize the benefits of this new technology while minimizing risks. Senator Lummis, it's great to have you here with us, and we look forward to hearing from you. Next, I'd like to introduce Randy Quarles. Randy is a highly respected voice within the financial and business communities and a longtime friend to Senator Hatch and staff. From 2017 to 2021, he was vice chair of the Federal Reserve, serving as the first vice chairman for supervision. He currently serves as the chairman and co-founder of the Sinosure Group. Randy, we're honored to have you here with us as well. And finally, it's my pleasure to introduce Bitstamp CEO, Bobby Zagoda. Bobby bridges the worlds of crypto and traditional finance. Before entering crypto, he was a senior managing director and member of the executive team at CME Group. He switched industries when he joined Kraken as the company's chief commercial officer. And just last summer, he was named the CEO of Bitstamp USA. Welcome, Bobby. We look forward to hearing your insights. I do know that Senator Lummis is running a tad behind as things go in Washington. There is a vote that is underway, and she's coming back from the Senate floor. So I'd ask if Randy and Bobby, if we could turn on your cameras and we can begin the Q&A session, and we will join in Senator Lummis when she arrives. It's good to see you both. Hi, Randy. Hi, Bobby. Thanks for your time today.
Hello.
Randy.
Great to be here.
It's really great to see you. And I'm going to begin with Bobby, if you're okay with that. You know, one of the objectives of these types of webinars hosted by the Hatch Foundation is to learn about emerging technologies and all things policy related. And so I want to ask you, Bobby, if you could help us understand what cryptocurrency is and what it is not. Sometimes there are a lot of, especially with this particular innovation, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. And I'd like to see if you could help clear up some of those.
Sure, and thank you, Matt, and the team for having me. Really pleased to be part of the conversation. Yeah, there's a lot of definitions flying around about what cryptocurrency is, but the definition that I think of and adhere to and talk about a lot is is that it's a currency in which transactions are verified and validated via a decentralized system, which is made possible by cryptography, versus transactions that are verified by some central authority. That's the primary difference in cryptocurrency versus other currencies and other aspects of the financial system around the world. And to your point, there's a lot of misconceptions about this, or misinterpretations or differing interpretations of what it is and what it means. But I think it's safe to say at this standpoint that has captured the imagination of a great many people around the globe. I think that in this country, we have the luxury of being able to trust many of our institutions, our central bank and our banking system and our global banks, but that's not true in many parts of the world. And so in the US, I think it's a little bit more recreational, or thought of as more recreational today, but in other parts of the world, it's literally a lifeline in order to be able to manage and maximize whatever value you're able to create in your lifetime.
That's very helpful. I want to shift over to Randy for a moment. In the early years of Bitcoin and other digital assets, for that matter, they were met with some skepticism from both Washington and Wall Street, and it seems that is changing. Would you agree? And why do you think that is changing?
Yeah, I'd agree with both parts of that question. I think in the early years, it wasn't really clear what the widespread use case would be for Bitcoin or similar crypto assets. They solved some technical issues in the payment system, but the price volatility made them ill-suited to be an actual payments mechanism. So the principal attractions seemed to be independence from the regulated monetary system, and anonymity, and neither of those are going to be terribly attractive to Washington. And for Wall Street, if you're an investor considering a novel technology with an unclear use case that's likely to attract unwelcome attention from regulators and from law enforcement, you're going to move slowly. But I think there are a few reasons that is changing now. That's particularly true with the advent of so-called stable coins, which are digital assets that are tied to some reference point, usually a basket of some traditional currencies or financial assets. That tames the volatility. It makes the coins more useful as a payments mechanism. And many of the digital asset developers are using the distributed ledger technology to create transparency rather than anonymity, which, if you just think about it, that seems logical, that sort of technology ought to be able to actually do a good job of creating transparency in ways. I think there are some coins out there that are even superior to the current payment system. And that both assuages the concerns of Washington, and it makes the use case much broader from Wall Street's point of view.
I want to stay with you, Randy. As you alluded to, Wall Street is talking more about crypto. From your vantage point there at Sinosure, have you all been engaging more on the investment front?
So we certainly looked at a number of things. I think again, serious investors are looking much more broadly at crypto than they were even a few years ago. There are funds out there that are completely devoted to crypto. And broader financial services funds, I think really almost all of them consider that they have to have some exposure to crypto as part of sort of diversified exposure to financial services. And again, with the broadening of the use case and with the broadening of public interest and acceptance, I think there's a lot of interest from investors. I think, in many aspects of the crypto ecosystem, there is clearly some speculative excess that's going on, but there is also an increasing understanding that there is really some there, and that when the speculation settles down, there's a sort of real durable technology that will produce value for people who invest in it.
That's great. Randy, we'll circle back to that. I like the they're there. We'll follow back up on that. Senator Lummis, Welcome to the webinar. We are honored to have you. We know that you are coming back from a vote. It's a busy Wednesday in Washington, so thank you for joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure. Of course, this is a topic that matters to my state and to me. Wyoming passed legislation that would allow for special purpose depository institutions and is trying to create a climate that is friendly to Bitcoin and other digital assets. We recognize that it benefits the reputable industry if there is a regulatory framework that complies with laws like the Bank Secrecy Act and the Anti-Money Laundering Act. So people don't get the impression that is sometimes shared that this is used for nefarious purposes more than it's used for legitimate purposes, because certainly the converse is true. There are also going to be in this space Bitcoin, which is proving the test of time, and alternative coins, altcoins, that will not. There will be scams in this area. There will be people who conflate credible products with those that are not. And so I think it's important that we have a regulatory framework that can help sort those out.
That's very helpful. And, you know, Senator, before you joined, we did mention a little about what you're working on this year with your proposal, and we'll circle back to that. But I want to focus a tad on your journey in crypto. I understand that you bought your first Bitcoin in 2013, and fortunately, you didn't buy pizzas with your holdings. And it sounds like you still hold it. What motivated you to get involved, and what are some of the lessons that you've learned?
Well, I was Wyoming State Treasurer, so I managed and invested Wyoming's Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, taking assets, oil, gas, coal, uranium, trona, that were mined and converting them or a stream of revenue into cash that was invested in a diversified asset allocation that would produce revenue for our state. Interest income, dividends, and capital gains off our permanent funds became the second largest source of income for the state's general fund and constituted the equivalent, when I was there, of about $1,200 per working person in Wyoming. So that was $1,200 that they didn't have to pay in taxes to support roads, schools, corrections, Medicaid, and essential government services. So I became an advocate for finding a mix of assets, some that could have short-term income and others that represented the same store of value that minerals in the ground represent. As I learned more about Bitcoin specifically, I came to view it as the equivalent of the store of value that is represented by minerals in the ground. Bitcoin is digital gold. It's hard money. There will only be 21 million ever produced, and they are a mined product or commodity. I had a grounding in that sort of concept so it just made sense to me. And then I had a son-in-law who taught me how to purchase Bitcoin. And then the more, when you have skin in the game, you learn more, which I did. And then in January of 2017, when I left Congress, I was invited to speak at the Satoshi Roundtable, not about digital assets, thanks goodness, because I really didn't know very much about them, but just about how Congress works. While I was there was a significant discussion that year about the Bitcoin blockchain. And it was apparently a very significant discussion that I got to sit in on and listen to, and I was just fascinated. And at that point, then I was hooked, learned more about it, and watched Wyoming's legislature adopt legislation that would make this industry important in my state. So it all got woven together.
It's fascinating when you talk about Wyoming, which it is a mining state.
It is.
Then equate that with the digital mining. And I want to stay on this topic on crypto mining and shifting to you, Bobby. You know, one of the criticisms with crypto is it's bad for the environment. In fact, I read an estimate the other day that indicates that the daily energy needs for the Bitcoin network are comparable to the needs of a small country like Ireland. Now, technology is always evolving. They often say it's outdated by lunchtime. So there's great hope that things will become more efficient. But how do you talk about that? How do you explain the energy consumption and whether or not it's good for the environment with the crypto mining?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. And it's a really important topic, and it's a topic that the industry is grappling with. There's some real progress, however. So what you're referring to has to do with what's called a proof of work protocol, which requires quite a bit of computing power to log transactions onto the blockchain. But there are other protocols, including proof of stake, that now comprise more than 50% of the total crypto market cap, that have a different approach in completely, and one that is much more environmentally friendly. The other thing I would raise here is whereas this issue gets a lot of attention, and perhaps deservedly so, there are a lot of energy consuming industries in the world. And when you really compare this one with others, it's not unusual, at least in my estimation. So if you look, the senator mentioned gold, and if you think about digital gold, take a look at the energy footprint of physical gold mining versus Bitcoin. It's about 2x the impact, and I'm not talking about total environmental impact, just energy consumption. So that doesn't mean it's okay. We do need to focus on this topic. We do need to improve, but I think it sometimes gets unfairly singled out.
Oh, and I agree. And Senator Lummis, I know that Wyoming and even Texas, they've gotten involved in some of the green mining initiatives. Can you shed some light on that?
There's a company in Wyoming that is currently hooked up to about a dozen gas wells that otherwise would have that gas flared or vented into the atmosphere, but they can pull mining rigs, Bitcoin mining rigs, right up, connect to that otherwise vented or flared gas stream, and mine Bitcoin on site. So one of the advantages of Bitcoin mining is that you can take the mining apparatus to the energy source that is otherwise being wasted or is otherwise stranded, and you can use it right on site. So that's an environmental benefit as opposed to an environmental detractor. And there was a study by Cambridge that said that over 40% of the energy consumed in Bitcoin mining is from renewable resources, which is higher than the average industry worldwide. You look at cloud computing, for example, which just consumes a tremendous amount of energy. That's an industry that I think is overlooked in terms of its massive energy consumption. So of course we have to look for ways to do this more efficiently. the fun thing about Bitcoin miners is that they do, and they are. And in my state, that is an oil and gas producing state, and hydrocarbons are falling into disfavor. So if you can pull the mining equipment right up to the oil and gas rigs and use the product to produce the energy right there on site where it is pulled out of the ground, you have a way more efficient use of the natural gas than if you put it in a pipeline, convert it to electricity, and use it in that manner.
That's fascinating. Randy, I want to circle back to you, and obviously coming from the finance world, some have argued that crypto is a threat to traditional banking. How do you respond to that that thought, and is it true?
So I don't think that crypto itself is a threat to the banking system. Certainly, private sector crypto assets have some different views about the potential for a central bank digital currency, but I think that private sector crypto is complementary to the traditional banking system. It creates the possibility for additional competition from non-banking actors, yes, but competition isn't a bad thing. It's certainly not an existential threat, and it also creates opportunities for new business lines for banks, crypto custody, for example, even the issuance of so-called stable coins. The Biden administration has proposed really that all stable coins should be issued from regulated banks. And while I think that's a little bit of overkill, it's not irrational, and it's an example of the fact that this technology can in fact be very useful to the banking system, and certainly not a threat to it.
Thanks for that. And Senator Lummis, I know that as you sit on the Senate Banking Committee, I'd like to get your insights on this. What does the future look like for crypto and traditional banking? Do you think that one day most banks will have a crypto division?
I do think that will be the case. What I think is more significant right now in these early years of Bitcoin and other digital assets is how advantageous it really is to the unbanked community. What you're seeing is very large participation and ownership in Bitcoin and other altcoins by minority communities, including Black and Hispanic communities, people who live in governments that are unstable, subject to high inflation, or subject to regimes that are usurping currency from people. It is the fact that Bitcoin is completely decentralized makes it something that allows for poor people to participate. It allows for remittances to be sent from the United States to a poor family in Central America without high bank fees, without getting it in the hands of criminals along the way and thieves along the way. They don't have to pay the Western Union fees. They can send, the son can send to his mother on the phone a remittance, and she in El Salvador or Nicaragua can get it and begin to spend it right away. So I think that the current really strong advantage is to the unbanked and the underbanked. And eventually you'll see the traditional banking community integrate digital assets, Bitcoin, I think specifically, alongside the US dollar and other fiat currencies.
It's interesting you brought up Western Union. I've often thought that crypto could easily be the 21st century Western Union. Yes. As folks transact around the world. I recognize that you've got another vote coming, and so I want to use our time wisely with you. I want to also loop in Bobby, because last year during the consideration of the infrastructure bill, crypto had its Washington moment.
Mhm.
And it was one that there was an effort and to use crypto as a pay for. In Washington speak, that's how lawmakers find ways to pay for legislation. And in this case, it was for the infrastructure bill. I turn to both Senator Lummis and Bobby. Tell us what happened and what were the lessons learned in that effort.
Well, from my perspective, Treasury had defined broker in a way that pulled people into its definition that did not have any information on the ultimate customer. It brought in software and hardware developers and miners into the definition of broker. So it represented, I believed, a fundamental misunderstanding of the industry. The wonderful thing that happened as a result of that was it awakened a sleeping giant. Many senators had no idea how many of their constituents owned and understood the implications of that definition of broker. So people all over the country were calling their Senate offices. It was the most talked about component of the infrastructure bill in terms of the relationship between constituents and their senators. So it brought an awareness. It forged relationships between constituents and their senators. And it brought senators together who didn't know each other and about their interest in digital assets. So to me, it was more silver lining than I expected it to be. I developed working relationships with Ron Wyden, with now Kirsten Gillibrand, of course, with Kirsten Sinema, because we founded the Financial Innovation Caucus together, Bill Cassidy, John Hickenlooper. It has now Ted Cruz owns Bitcoin. He didn't before. He became very interested because the industry in Texas really reached out to him and awakened his interest in this subject. So it had this wonderful effect of educating the Senate and helping the digital asset industry begin to interact with policymakers. So I saw that as a real win.
Bobby?
Yeah, I view it similarly. It was a galvanizing moment for the industry, and it really, I mean, when I moved into the industry in 2018, it was a very different world then, and people thought I was absolutely insane. So just the fact that it's on the legislative agenda, that it's being talked about, this is a giant step forward, and so that's a great news kind of story. However, there's a lot of work to do, and I want to thank Senator Lummis on behalf of the industry. I don't know where we would be, frankly, if there weren't strong independent voices educating the rest of the Congress around what's going on. And the bill that is being envisioned is really what's necessary, in my opinion. We need specific laws that can anticipate the nuances of this unique technology and of this unique industry. The best example of this, by the way, is, as the senator mentioned, the SBDI law in Wyoming. And I had the opportunity to work with Tyler Lindholm and the task force there back in 2019. And my liver is just about recovered from that. But it was an incredible learning experience regarding what is possible when you bring minds together to think about the future and not try to retrofit half-century-old laws to this technology.
Senator Lummis, before you have to run for your vote, I just want to ask one final question to you. The Fed currently holds more than $40 billion in foreign assets and foreign currencies on its balance sheet. Why not add Bitcoin?
Well, I think it's a great idea. to be honest. And I think that once there is a statutory and regulatory framework, that will make a lot of sense. The fact that it is completely decentralized is going to make it over time more ubiquitous. And I think it's going to be something that the Fed should hold on its balance sheet. You'll see, I think, just in the coming weeks, some legislation rollout that's really comprehensive. We began in December sending our bill draft around for comment quietly among regulators and among people in the Bitcoin community. We got, and the digital asset community at large, we got a tremendous amount of feedback. And we've incorporated those early comments into a new draft that is at Ledge Council now. We will either then put it out more publicly for a second round of comment that is more publicly known, or we will go ahead and file it and gain additional comment that way. This bill can be broken logically into about 5 or 6 pieces that are standalone. We're working with other Senate offices and in both parties to see who's interested in sponsoring the banking component, the privacy component, the consumer protection component of this legislation. And so we're developing strategies to roll it out behind the scenes, but it's at Ledge Council now. So you'll be seeing the second go round of it is at Ledge Council. So you'll be seeing it very soon. It basically utilizes the existing structure, but then puts sort of between the SEC and the CFTC a self-regulatory organization, an SRO, that would sort of make some of the initial calls on whether something's a commodity or a security. And then if either of those entities disagrees, then they can have a mechanism to pull it in their direction from a regulatory framework perspective. So a lot of ideas being kicked around. We'd love your input, So stay tuned.
Thank you, Senator. Again, I know that you've got to run to your vote. We are grateful that you've taken time from your busy schedule to join us. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. It's just an honor to be with people with this interest and expertise today. Take care.
Randy, I saw you smile when I asked her the question, the senator, about Bitcoin and adding it to the Federal Reserve balance sheet. It's not every day you talk to a former vice chair. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think Bitcoin will be added to the Fed's holdings anytime soon. For reasons quite separate from crypto, I think it's important that the Fed move as promptly as it's practicable to a balance sheet that's really entirely treasuries, and part of that is to avoid the slippery slope of using the Fed's balance sheet to politically allocate credit or financial support, if you will. Which once you start saying, well, let's invest in this, other than just treasury securities, well, why not this? And why not this worthy cause? And why not this potential financial home run? And for a lot of political economy reasons, I think that it's best to keep the Fed's balance sheet, which it isn't currently. It needs to move more in that direction, entirely treasuries.
Got it. I want to have your regulator's point of view on this next question. Why does Gary Gensler, why in your view has he taken such a hard stance against crypto? Before he got to the SEC, he seemed to be much more open to the idea, and since he's gotten there, it's become more of a hardened stance. What is your opinion on that?
Well, and part of it is simply the perfectly legitimate and certainly humanly true fact that where you stand depends on where you sit. The SEC is responsible for investor protection. And before Gensler arrived in Washington for his current tour of duty, the discussion around crypto focused really on the design of crypto assets, on macro financial stability concerns. I was very focused on those issues, both from my position as vice chair of the Fed board and as chair of the International Financial Stability Board. And we thought a lot about crypto assets, but really from that framework. So how are these things being designed, and what are the implications for a whole range of monetary policy or financial stability concerns? And Gary arrived and emphasized that we do have a public interest in the safe trading of crypto assets, really apart from their kind of fundamental design and investor protection concerns that really hadn't been as focused on. So I think that's a perfectly fair emphasis for the chair of the SEC, and a little bit explains a little bit of his kind of difference in tone from being a professor where he was thinking a lot about design and financial stability questions, and then sitting in the SEC chair and saying, well, I need to think about investor protection questions. I do think, though, that he's probably overemphasizing the anti-crypto stance now, at least in tone, because there is a relatively small swath of the political ecosystem in Washington that nonetheless has a lot of sway in Washington right now on these issues in the Biden administration, and they don't like crypto, precisely because it creates more independence from the governmental system. So crypto animosity is almost a necessity currently for an ambitious regulator from the current majority party in Washington. And I think that makes his foot on the gas pedal a little heavier than it might otherwise be.
That's fascinating. Bobby, I want to, going off of what Randy just said, what are you seeing from the industry, and are there mixed signals that you're seeing coming from the SEC, and how does that impact you day to day?
Yeah, there's no question there's mixed signals, and it's having a very dampening or slowing effect on the entire ecosystem. And that's, at the cost of potential value or opportunity for lots and lots and lots of citizens. Here's how I view it. And at Bitstamp, we're very much pro-regulated crypto environment perspective, right? So it's not that we love working with regulators as much as we just view it as necessary for broad scale adoption, right? There needs to be a common sense regulatory framework if this topic and this concept is really going to be useful for many people. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I do acknowledge that these regulators have a tough job, right? So they do have to protect consumers, but at the same time, they have to do that in a way that doesn't halt innovation and that doesn't limit competitiveness for the US in a very global economy. And so this crypto idea is really stretching that relationship across those three things. And then finally, I'll say one other thing, which is, from a market participant perspective, I can't speak for every company in the crypto space, but for Bitstamp, we just want to do what's right. We just want to follow all the rules. We want to be immaculate, but it's extremely challenging to do that today because there seems to be a hesitancy to just lay out the guidelines, just say, here's what it is. Rather, we're operating off of remarks here and there and trying to guess what that might mean in terms of the legality of different opportunities.
I'm mindful of the time, but this is so interesting. I want to stay with you, Bobby, and I'll pivot to Randy after this, but could you talk a little about what are stable coins and the importance of those in the crypto world? And then to Randy, I would ask, do you think that could stable coins strengthen the position of the US dollar and obviously relative to other currencies? So Bobby, give us a kind of a 101 on what are stable coins, and would like to hear from Randy what his thoughts are about whether or not it could strengthen the position of the US dollar.
Yeah, sure. So a stable coin is a digital currency that is pegged to a national fiat currency such as the US dollar. And they play an incredibly important role in the ecosystem because they kind of combine the frictionless transaction efficiency of cryptocurrencies with the stability of these, obviously very reliable and stable national currencies. And how people use them is to transact, across cryptocurrencies without having to manage fiat on-ramps and off-ramps all the time off of platforms, investing or trading platforms. I think they play an incredibly important role. I think that, however, they should be trusted and trustworthy, and therefore there should be some transparency around the reserves or the backing for these tokens.
Oops. Yeah, I guess I am unmuted. So from the sort of the international financial system, even geopolitical point of view, I do think that stable coins are they're a significant opportunity. So there are aspects of our payment system currently that are very kludgy and clunky. If you want to buy something from a merchant in the UK over Amazon, that's pretty straightforward with a credit card. Maybe a little on the expensive side, but but at the end of the day, it's all that's okay. But if you want to send a friend in London £100 from your dollar account in Salt Lake City, that is expensive and time consuming. Senator Lummis referred to the difficulties of lower income folks making remittances abroad. You could spend 20 or 30% of that amount to transfer it, and it could take days. And stable coins can make that transaction instantaneous and cheap, almost costless. We've been trying for years to make our traditional payment system more efficient. Again, at the Financial Stability Board, while I was chair there, we had a large and complex project to improve the efficiency of the payment system to try to reduce the cost and time without a lot of progress, certainly very slow progress. And stablecoins are a solution that's available today and eminently scalable, and making a technology like that available globally to ease cross-border payments in dollars would make the dollar an even more attractive currency for international transactions. We should be encouraging that.
Excellent. This is the last question I'm going to pose to Randy first, and then we'll end with Bobby. Give us your thoughts about the pros and the cons of central bank digital currencies, and if the Fed, again, should explore making one. And Bobby, do you think that these currencies would crowd out the need for other cryptos?
Okay, well, so I'll given with an eye on the clock, I'll try to keep my remarks to under an hour and 45 minutes on central bank digital currencies. So the current enthusiasm of central banks around the world for CBDCs was triggered by two events: Facebook's proposal to adopt a stablecoin called Libra for transactions on the Facebook platform a few years ago, and China's announcement at about the same time that it was developing a state-sponsored digital currency. People on the left didn't like the idea of a private company scaling a private currency rapidly, although it's really worth noting that almost all of our money is issued by large private companies in the form of bank deposits. Very little of our money is actually a direct relationship with the Federal Reserve, just the little pieces of paper in our pockets. And people on the right thought that we would be falling behind China in the competition for global influence if China had a central bank digital currency and we did not. I think both of those are terrible reasons for a central bank digital currency, because the fear of a private company issuing money is almost illiterate in a world where all of our money is already issued by large private companies. And people like the dollar for a raft of reasons, including the rule of law and the depth of our investment markets and the reliability of our monetary policy. None of that's going to change and make people prefer the renminbi just because it's in a digital token form. People have since proposed maybe there are other benefits to a central bank digital currency. I think when you look closely at them, they all fade away too. So that leaves you with where many of the central banks are currently. So maybe there's no good reason to do it, but why not? It's fun and future-y, and so why shouldn't the central bank issue them? And the answer is because it would run a significant risk of a material disintermediation of the private sector banking system. If the central bank issued a digital dollar that was much easier to transact in than the pieces of paper we have in our pocket electronically, that would inevitably siphon at least some of the deposits out of the banking system. The ECB estimates it could be as much as 20% of the deposits out of the banking system, with the best will in the world, trying not to disintermediate the banking system. And if we do that, that money has to be re-intermediated into the financial system somehow. Either the Fed would have to replace the lending was otherwise supported by those deposits, which would inevitably be politicized. It would be the definition of the political allocation of credit. Or the Fed would have to put that money back into the financial system, and it would come with strings. The politicians would not allow, even though we sort of sucked it out, they would not allow us to put it back in without all sorts of political strings on that money. And history has shown us that the political allocation of credit is a great danger. So I think a CBDC, there are no good reasons for it. There are good reasons not to, and the Fed should not do it.
Bobby.
Yeah, I don't disagree. What I was going to say is, I think it's first important to ask, what problem are we trying to solve, right? So to Randy's point, it's hard to find what problem we're trying to solve. Like, obviously, China has some specific objectives that I think they're pursuing with their CBDC initiative, but I don't think those objectives are relevant in the U.S. and in most jurisdictions around the world. So it would certainly not be. Now, there may be efficiencies to be had somewhere down the line, or maybe there's opportunities. I'm certainly not a central banker, but this is not something I view as a priority for the government or the industry to go try to figure out at this moment. There's much more pressing issues.
And on that point, we're going to bring our symposium to a close. I want to thank Randy and Bobby. Thank you for taking time from your schedules. Obviously, Senator Lummis, we're grateful for your perspectives, your insights on this, I think, a very complicated but interesting area. You've certainly given us a better understanding of crypto's importance and the road ahead on regulation. As many as you, to our viewers, the mission of the Hatch Foundation is to advance common sense solutions, and today's discussion got us one step closer to that goal. And we hope everyone has enjoyed this discussion and for what it means to have so many experts on this line today. Thank you very much, and we look forward to our next event. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.